Remember, kids, women are capable of doing any job men can do, and they deserve equal opportunities. And also remember, women are leeches who will literally drain the life out of you. This is a review of the Star Trek The Animated Series episode, The Lorelei Signal. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why men are too emotional to be trusted with authority, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. So what's it gonna be? Women's empowerment or sexist paranoia? In the immortal words of a little girl in a meme made from an old El Paso commercial, why not both? The Enterprise is at a sector of space where ships have been recorded to mysteriously vanish every 27.346 years. But that's just like an average, right? They collected records of all the ships that have disappeared in this region of space, and they worked out that a ship goes missing every 27 point whatever years on average. Because if it's a literal 27 point whatever years, what does that mean? Is this region of space so busy that there are just always ships around? Or there just happens to be a ship in the area at the exact right moment whenever it's time for one to disappear? That makes no sense. That's ridiculous. It's got to be an average. Oh, never mind. Spock's doing a countdown. Well, we know who the disappearing ship is going to be this time. Is this really the best method to be investigating this? Starfleet called Captain Kirk and said, hey, ships have been disappearing without a trace in this one area. Take your ship there and see if you disappear. We'll get to the bottom of this. Anyway, the Enterprise is waiting around. Spock is counting down to exactly 27.346789101 years since the last ship disappeared, but when the countdown reaches 0, instead of some sudden violent event, a black hole appearing or a wormhole opening or something, Uhura reports that she's receiving a signal. She puts the signal on speakers and reports that it's originating from a planet 20 light years away, at the far edge of this sector. Uhura doesn't notice anything special about the signal, but all the men on the bridge find it quite compelling. Even Spock likens the signal to a summons. Kirk orders the course to be set for the origin point of the signal, and the Enterprise warps away to find it. Uhura calls Nurse Chapel to the bridge and says, hey, can you confirm that the men are acting strange? Chapel's like, you're just noticing this now? We've been in space with these doofuses a long time. The men begin seeing visions of women. Uhura and Chapel don't see anything, which Kirk notices. He's still got enough of his wits about him to recognize that something strange is happening. Spock deduces that their hallucinations must be caused by the signal they're receiving. They arrive at the planet, which shimmers into view, and Kirk, Spock, and Sulu gather around the view screen and stare at it, grinning like dopes. Kirk immediately leads a landing party to the planet's surface, leaving Scotty in command of the Enterprise. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Carver, the random security guy getting his chance at the big time, are drawn to this building. Spock warns that they should keep their distance until they figure out what kind of power is influencing them, but Kirk's like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine, let's go. They enter the building where they meet Thela and her friends, the women they were seeing in their visions. Thela's like, hi, Captain Kirk, Spock, and Dr. McCoy. Kirk says, how did you know our names? Thela says, oh, that's easy. We have a magic computer that knows everything. You just have to hum at it a little to turn it on, and then ask it a question. It's neat. Anyway, who's hungry? A bit later, everyone's hanging out, and McCoy says, hey, you dames sure are hot to trot, but what about the fellas? Where are all the other swingin' Richards around here? Thela says, oh, the men? They, are somewhere else. Kirk says, that makes sense. Then one of the women throws something at Spock, which knocks him over. Then Kirk and McCoy notice they're kind of woozy too, and Thela orders them to be taken somewhere to sleep it off. And as they go, Thela sheds a single tear, like a white guy pretending to be a Native American guy who just had litter thrown at him. When Kirk, McCoy, and Spock wake up, they've noticeably aged, and they're wearing tiaras. That's odd. Usually a tiara will make you seem younger. Anyway, back on the Enterprise, Uhura has had other women on the ship running scans, and they figured out that the subspace signal they received at the beginning of all this affects humanoid males, and that prolonged exposure to the signal results in weakness and eventually death. Uhura calls security and says, I want a team of hot, badass girlies guarding all transporter rooms. Nobody goes down to that planet without my say-so. Nurse Chapel's like, what are you doing? And Uhura says, I'm smashing the patriarchy, motherfucker. That doesn't work, though, because the villains are women, so aren't you smashing the matriarchy? I'm smashing the patriarchy on the ship so I can smash the matriarchy down there on the... Yeah, you know what? Forget it. I'm in charge. Uhura and Chapel head to the bridge, where Scotty is still in command, drunkenly singing an old Welsh ballad. Uhura says, Hey, Scotty, I'm taking control of the ship. Scotty's like, okay. Uhura immediately promotes Chapel to acting chief medical officer and gives all the women working on the ship a raise to finally wipe out the wage gap. Down on the planet, the landing party is being held captive by Thela. Their phasers and communicators have been taken, but McCoy still has his medical kit, so he gives everyone a shot of a stimulant to liven them up a bit as those tiaras, which they can't seem to remove, continue to sap their strength and age them. Spock uses McCoy's medical scanner to pick the lock of the door, and they make a run for it. Thela and some of the other women chase them, so they run outside into the garden and hide inside a gigantic urn. Inside the urn, Spock again makes a brilliant Holmesian deduction by observing that as they have grown weaker, Thela and the other women have grown stronger and more vital. It doesn't take a genius to see which direction this is going, so they agree that Spock, who as a Vulcan has a longer lifespan and is less affected by the tiaras than the others, will climb out of the urn and sneak back into the building to find their communicators and call the Enterprise for help. That turns out to be pretty easy. The building is empty when Spock gets there. He walks up to the magic computer that knows everything, hums at it to wake it up, and says, Hey, where's our shit? And the computer says, It's over there. And Spock, who has grown so weak he has to crawl, makes his way to the drawer where their communicators are being kept, grabs one, calls the Enterprise, and says, One all-female rescue party, please. And then Thela's women discover him. Uhura beams down with Chapel and her girl power death squad, and they are not fucking around. Some of Thela's women charge in, and Uhura's like, Take him out! And they all take phaser blasts. On the stun setting, of course. Uhura's not that cool. Though Uhura does personally drop Thela, so that's pretty cool. They locate Spock after he sends a psychic message to his ex-girlfriend Nurse Chapel, but he's delirious and can't tell them where Kirk and the rest of the landing party are. Meanwhile, it's raining outside, and that urn they're hiding in is filling up with water. Thela regains consciousness, and Uhura says, Tell me where Captain Kirk is, or I'll kill every last one of you and burn this place to the ground, I swear to God. So Thela has the magic computer that knows everything reveal the backstory of her little group, and basically what happened was her people settled this planet a long time ago only to discover that it naturally drains energy. But the women eventually evolved a gland that allowed them to absorb energy from the men and also to emotionally influence them. Eventually, all the men died, and the women started sending out their signal to draw in ships so they could drain the energy of those men. They have to do this every 27-blurpity-flurpity years to survive, hence the regular pattern of disappearing ships. But, existing in this endless parasitic cycle of deception, manipulation, and death has a downside, believe it or not. Thela and the others are stuck on this planet, never aging, never dying, and unable to have children. Uhura says, Hey, that sucks for you. Where's Captain Kirk? Or am I going to have to start setting fires? Thela asks the magic computer that knows everything where Kirk and the others in the landing party are, and it reveals their location. Uhura and her Angel's Revenge team run out, and Uhura, who is totally making the most of her chance to be a gun-slinging woman of action, shoots the urn, destroying it and freeing Kirk, McCoy, and that other guy before they drown. The landing party, including Spock, is taken up to sickbay, but Nurse Chapel can't figure out how to restore them to their former selves. Then Spock says, Hey, I've got a kooky idea. Use our saved transporter patterns to reconstitute our bodies as we were before we put on those tiaras. It's a long shot, but if it works, maybe people can just do that anytime they run into a problem even vaguely similar to this one. So they do that. They beam the aged, depleted landing party back down to the planet, then beam them up again, and after Scotty futzes around a bit with the controls, they materialize in the transporter room, and Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and that other guy, Cooter, whatever his name is, they're all back to normal! Yay! Uhura returns to the planet. Thela destroys the transmitter they've been using to send out the signal. Uhura says, "Great! Starfleet is sending a ship to pick you up and take you to another planet where eventually you'll start to age and you'll become just like other people. Maybe you'll even get knocked up and have kids who will grow to hate you." Oh, I hope so. The end! Let me get this out of the way right now. I like this episode. It's fun. There are aspects of it that I think are very smart and well done. It's a breeze to sit through. And overall, I find it one of the best shows in the animated series, but oh boy, are there some things here that could have used some more work, both in terms of plot and in terms of the overall impression left by the episode. Let me start with the plot. I already had some fun with the idea of there being a regular cycle of ship disappearances so predictable that it's been calculated out to 3 decimal places. Nothing about that makes any sense. It's ridiculous. But it's also ridiculous in a way that Star Trek is often ridiculous, and I find it more endearing than annoying, so sure, a ship disappears exactly every 27.346 years, and you can have a countdown to the precise moment of disappearance. Why not? The biggest plot hole isn't the timing of the ship disappearances, but the reason for them. We're told that Thela and the others on the planet have to lure in men to drain them of their energy in order to survive. Okay, but it turns out that Thela and the others aren't evil. They don't like doing this. They feel bad about having to capture and kill a bunch of men every 27 years. They feel cursed, trapped by their lives of ageless immortality. So why don't they just stop? There's nothing compelling them to keep sending out their signal and enticing unsuspecting men to come so Thela and the other women can absorb their life force or whatever. They're choosing to do it. They're making a lot of choices in doing it, actually. They have to send out the signal. They have to put those tiaras on the heads of the men. They have to keep the men captive while their energy is being absorbed. And Thela and the other women on this planet decide of their own free will to do this, even though, apparently, they really don't want to. It's not even a matter of them acting selfishly because they're afraid of death. They seem to hate being immortal. There's no reason given for them to be doing this. They don't have to. They don't want to. They just do. Maybe they don't want to die on this planet because, I don't know, maybe its energy-sapping properties means that if they don't occasionally recharge themselves, their deaths will be slow and painful, like those experienced by the men they trap. Okay, fair enough, but that assumption doesn't solve the problem. Why don't they just leave? They seem to have very advanced technology. Do they not have spaceships? Thela tells Uhura that they settled this planet after leaving their home world. How'd they get here? But again, let's give the plot the benefit of the doubt and make another assumption and say that maybe the ships they came in are too old to fly and they've lived this way for so long that they've forgotten how to build new ships. That's another recurring Star Trek trope, the society that becomes so dependent on its technology that it forgets how to actually operate and repair it. So, okay, let's say that's the situation. No spaceships on Thela's planet. They have a long-distance transmitter. They can contact ships up to 20 light years away. When a ship arrives at the planet, instead of capturing the men and absorbing their energy, why doesn't Thela just say, "Hey, can you give us a ride? We've been trapped here for centuries and it's not fun anymore and we really want to leave." That's what happens at the end of the episode. Uhura says Starfleet is sending a ship to pick you up and take you to another planet, and once you're there, you won't be immortal anymore and you can live just like most other people. And Thela's like, awesome. But if that's what Thela wanted, she could have done that any time. Nothing that she does in this episode makes any sense. If you've been a bank robber for 30 years and you hate robbing banks and you don't need the money and there's no other reason why you need to keep robbing banks, Stop robbing banks. Take the money you stole, change your name, retire to Belize. Problem solved. Turning to the thematic side of the episode, I'm not so sure about the gender politics of this one. I see where they were going, and I applaud and appreciate what I take to be the intention, but there are a few rough patches. Having Uhura and the women of the Enterprise step up and take charge after the men are called away by Thila's siren song is a fine enough concept. It seems like trite, superficial girl power stuff nowadays, but in its original context of the early 1970s, when people were still arguing over whether or not a woman should be allowed to turn down her husband for sex, I imagine it made for a much more powerful statement. Unfortunately, at the same time as Uhura and Chapel are providing positive, empowering feminine representation, Thila and the gals are down on the planet embodying some of the most insidious misogynistic stereotypes ever imagined by the minds of mediocre men. Women set traps for men. Women rely on men because they're too weak to make it on their own. Women will drain you dry and leave you an empty husk of your former self. It's the premise of every sexist joke ever told by a hack dude comedian. And let's not forget that Thila and the other women of the planet are tragic figures because they can't have children. They're eternally young and beautiful, but their lives are pointless because they can't get pregnant and have babies. And look, there's nothing wrong with a woman or anyone of any gender wanting children. I'm not an antinatalist. If you want to have children and you can't, that's a terribly sad thing. But depicting women in fiction who can't have children as lonely, depressed, unfulfilled, incomplete people is also a gross, hackneyed sexist trope. Bringing the women of the show to the forefront for an episode also has the unintentional side effect of emphasizing how minimized their role usually is. With the men out of commission, we realize how out of balance the show is in terms of gender. Again, considered in its original context, it's not that bad. Merely having Uhura, a woman, and a black woman, in a position where she could plausibly take command of the Enterprise in this situation, read as a much more feminist statement in 1973 than it does today. But that's more of a comment on the general state of affairs at that time than on the show. The men who usually run the ship are out of commission, so Uhura, Chapel, and a bunch of nameless background women take over for a few hours and save the day by defeating the all-female gang of villains. It ain't exactly the Woman King. However, like I said, despite those flaws, I do like this episode. Directed by prolific Filmation director and company co-founder Hal Sutherland, and written by Margaret Arman, who also wrote 3 episodes of Star Trek The Original Series, the Lorelei signals problematic aspects come across as incidental or honest oversights or products of the time in which it was made, and while apparent, are easy to overlook. Like many other episodes of the animated series, this one benefits greatly from the half-hour running time. The padded sluggishness that drags down many entries of the original series is nowhere to be found here as the plot moves swiftly from one beat to the next. While that plot does have some basic problems, which I already described, the episode is also smart enough to allow Kirk, Spock, and McCoy to be aware that they're being affected by some external influence. When they start hallucinating images of Thila or feel themselves being compelled to enter the building on the planet, they know they're being drawn into a trap. They just can't help themselves. That's more interesting than just having them become mindless, drooling saps. And, come on, for all the issues with the episode's gender politics, seeing Uhura take charge of the situation is pretty great. I love the shoot first and ask questions later energy she brings when she leads the rescue party at the end. She's pissed, she's in control, and she does not have time for your shit. I jokingly paraphrased it during my plot summary, but in the episode, Uhura actually says to Thila, "Release Captain Kirk and his men, or we will destroy your temple." It's hard to imagine even Kirk himself making such a direct threat. Acting Captain Uhura is not someone to fuck with. So yeah, the girl bossy elements play as meager and slightly misguided in the present day, but at the time they were a good faith attempt to carry forward Star Trek's mission of being inclusive and progressive. And the episode itself, despite the nonsensical motivations of the villains, is an easy, entertaining watch that places Uhura and Nichelle Nichols, who voices 3 other characters in this one besides Uhura, in a much-deserved and long overdue spotlight. This one is a signal well worth tuning into. Those are my thoughts on the Lorelei signal. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next time as this grab bag batch of reviews continues. Next up, a review of a randomly selected episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. And the TNG episode I pulled out of the grab bag is The Nth Degree. See you next time for that. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.